It is very rare in this day and age of government overreach and it seems constant tyranny that we have a huge win to report to you, but we do actually have a very good story to start us off tonight for you. This is from Reclaim the Net. It says, Court confirms Trudeau's Emergencies Act invocation against the Freedom Convoy was illegal. The damage is already done, and we'll talk about that after we go through this article. But it turns out freezing the bank accounts of civil liberties protesters was never legal to begin with. The Trudeau government has been handed a bruising from the Canadian Federal Court of Appeal, which ruled that the 2022 declaration of a national emergency to dismantle the trucker convoy was unlawful and unjustified. After 2 years of official spin about protecting Canadians, the court has said what critics knew from the start. The Emergencies Act was never meant for angry truckers and honking horns protesting against the erosion of civil liberties. The judges were blunt. Ottawa, they said, never had the factual or legal foundation required to declare a national emergency. As disturbing and disruptive as the blockades and the convoy protests in Ottawa could be, they fell well short of a threat to national security. In other words, the convoy may have jammed traffic, but it didn't topple the country. It goes on, the convoy started as opposition to vaccine and vaccine passport mandates and became a rolling protest against government control. Trucks filled Ottawa's downtown and coffee shops ran out of patience, but none of that, the court said, amounted to a national crisis. The court agreed with Justice Richard Mosley's earlier conclusion that the government's use of the Emergencies Act lacked justification, transparency, and intelligibility. Mosley had already found the cabinet violated charter rights by freezing the bank accounts of people who weren't breaking the law. The appeal judges noted there was no evidence that the lives, health, or safety of the people living in Ottawa were endangered, calling out the lack of rigor in how banks decided which accounts to freeze. In some cases, financial institutions relied on media reports and social posts to decide who lost access to their money. The image of bureaucrats scrolling Facebook to decide who gets financially exiled says plenty about the chaos behind the scenes. And we'll just read you one more portion of this. It says that Howard Sapers of the Canadian Civil Liberties Association called the decision a massive and historic victory for the rule of law and the rights and freedoms of all Canadians. He's right. He reminded the public that emergency powers are supposed to be a last resort, not a shortcut for bad policing. While the extraordinary powers granted to the federal government through the Emergencies Act may be necessary in some extreme circumstances, they can also threaten the rule of law and our democracy, he said. The government predictably is now reviewing the ruling and weighing an appeal. Public safety spokesperson Simon Lafortune said Ottawa remains steadfast in its commitment to ensuring the safety and security of Canadians. This is the same bureaucratic language that got them into trouble in the first place. So there's a couple of things that we'll say about that. Obviously, the government does not want to admit defeat ever. So that really speaks to the fact that they actually liked being tyrants and they want the opportunity to be able to do that again, hence the appeal. But also the fact that their egos are just too big to accept that the rule of law is actually more important than their ultimate goals, which is the ultimate control of the people, being able to cut off your ability to feed your family, to pay your bills at their will, whenever you are using your human right to protest what they're doing and their actions, which is what is supposed to be the case in a democracy. And yet they've shown us time and time again, and this is multiple governments across the West and the whole world really, that they don't actually care about democracy, that is just a line that they use when they need to get their PR messaging across to pretend that they are still functioning as a democracy when they behave in behaviors that are just anything but that. But the victory here is the legal victory and the fact that the people now have that validation, I suppose, that they were right all along. They did nothing wrong by protesting what they perceive to be tyranny in a so-called democracy. And what happens with a lot of these massive protests that actually gain a lot of traction is that the government cracks down really hard on these people and it deters them from protesting like this again. Don't you dare protest what we're doing, us racing towards the New World Order. Otherwise, you will be crushed. And we certainly saw that, say, for example, after January 6th, people were like, what do we do in future if we don't agree with what the government's done, or we don't think an election was really the way that they tell us that it was? Are we going to be treated in this manner again? The same thing happened in Australia, where they essentially fried protesters, from what we've been told and what our investigations have shown us, using perhaps 5G or other advanced weaponry. How else do protesters end up with burns inside their mouths and their under their clothes, and organ failure and cancers and all sorts of things from maybe the radiation that they were exposed to on that day? There is no other explanation other than they used some form of weaponry on them. And then people were concerned about protesting again in future. And this is what they do. The point is, and by the way, this is why they also have their agitators there, to cause violence when there is actually a peaceful protest from the people utilizing their right to protest, so that they have an excuse to ban protest in future. It does actually say that protests do work, especially at the scale of the trucker convoy. And it does make them think twice about ever doing this to the people again when you have this sort of win, and it gives people the courage and the confidence to protest again, which is their right. But we do want to say that this is one of the reasons why they're racing towards the digital agenda. What happened to the Canadian truckers is really an example of how quickly governments can seize control over everything that you own. And now think about that once a digital ID is paired with digital currency and a social credit system. And so we're just going to echo the message again today that this is the reason why the digital ID agenda and the digital control agenda must be opposed, I think, above all other battles. Reason being, if that is in place, then you can't even fight the other battles. Some terrible news out of Australia this week. The hate speech bill passed. We're seeing governments increasingly pass these tyrannical laws and digital ID laws and things of this nature. And, Ron DeSantis is saying that if digital ID ever comes to Florida, it's going to hit a brick wall. And yet they're introducing age verification there, which is digital ID, ladies and gentlemen. So we hope that through our discussions on these topics in this broadcast, we've helped to educate people on all the various different terms and forms and Trojan horses that governments will introduce for this same agenda, because ultimately, just like the Canadian government showed with their appeal of this decision, they would love to be able to do this to us all the time. Yuval Noah Harari says that tyrants of the past dreamed that they could have the technologies that are available to the tyrants of today. We added those words in. But this is the case. Whoever controls all of these digital systems will have the ultimate control over the people. And so we hope that people continue to oppose that, and we congratulate the Canadians for this historic win. Remember when they told us 2 weeks to control the spread? Those 2 weeks dragged on for years. While small businesses were crushed, the COVID era quietly created 573 new billionaires. That wasn't a health crisis, it was a wealth funnel. Now the next phase is being discussed openly. Digital IDs, CBDCs, social credit scores, and access to basic privileges based on compliance. They tested control on your body, now they're moving to your wallet. That's why cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin exist, designed as freedom money with no central authority and a fixed supply that can't be printed or artificially devalued. You can wait and hope your money is never frozen for bad behavior, or you can reclaim control of your financial future with cryptocurrencies. You don't need technical knowledge to get started. BlockTrust IRA makes crypto investing simple, and their Animus AI platform does all the heavy lifting for you. All you have to do is talk to one of their crypto experts, and they'll walk you through the rest. Book your free financial freedom appointment now at dailypulsecrypto.com. That's dailypulsecrypto.com.